In this episode of Fifth Gear, we see what it takes to roll a 4x4, then test drive the Pagani Zonda Roadster, Renault Clio V6, and the latest offerings from Subaru and Mitsubishi.
We're a nation in love with 4x4s. The market for off-roaders is ballooning and sales in Britain are up 20% this year.
We don't mind the lousy fuel consumption, the parking difficulties or the expense of running them because they are our own personal tanks.
We like the idea that the lofty driving position and acres of metal will protect us in an impact. Research in America says that when a small car and a big 4x4 collide, you're 24 times more likely to die in the car than in the 4x4.
And for those with kids, the desire to get an advantage in the highway arms race is even stronger. The result is that they clutter every school run in the land. But there's always been a lingering doubt.
A little nag in the back of our minds that surely something so high is more likely to roll over. And then how safe will we be? All it takes is something in the road to cause you to swerve, and it can all go horribly wrong.
So we've decided to take the bull bar by the horns and find out exactly how easy it is to roll a typical 4x4. We've got one stuntman, one runway, one emergency manoeuvre. What do you think will happen?
Join us later to find out.
Italy has never been short of serious drivers' cars, and what an opportunity to have one of my favourites, the Lamborghini Murcielago, and an empty Monza circuit to play with. But I'm teasing you, because today I'd rather tear myself away and go down the road to a grubby industrial estate, the unlikely home of an even more delicious prospect. So, you're Pagani, you make the Zonda, the first choice in a dream garage, the last word in exotica. Everyone who goes near it says it's just about perfect. And you know, because you always paid attention in sports car class, that the very last thing you should do is upset the delicate handling balance by chopping the roof off. So, what are they going to do? Chop the roof off. Doof. As any Lego expert will tell you, removing one side means everything goes wobbly. Fine for the playroom, but lousy for cars. No rigidity ruins the subtle chassis characteristics your reputation is built on. And the problems of prancing around topless don't stop there. No roof guarantees scuttle shake, where a bump in the road will cause the whole cabin to rattle and roll. So if you ask me if the Zonda Roadster is going to be a hit or a miss, I'd have to say a miss. But I'm just going to check. No more than 40 of these Roadsters will ever be made. But given that so far only 35 coupes have been delivered, they won't reach that limit in a hurry. You can specify practically anything you want, from 1,000 shades of silver to rare leathers like this ostrich hide. Even the tyres are specially made for the Zonda by Michelin. The finish everywhere is exquisite. Just drink in the details. Then there's the roof, which cleverly stays in the front, and would be a bit fiddly to erect in a hurry if it wasn't for some expert help from Signor Pagani himself. This is the first Roadster to be built and has been bought by a German who made his fortune in pneumatic valves. It should complement his coupe perfectly, lucky devil. Pagani kindly said we could have a go as long as I didn't do Tiff Needell style driving. Spoil sports. Still, Tiff style driving or not, I was going to head for the open road as quickly as possible. Most Zonda talk revolves around its 7.3-litre V12 and 220 miles an hour top speed, but no one ever mentions quite what a pussycat it is to cruise around in. Purring round sleepy Italian villages puts thoughts of hits and misses to the back of your mind. This is definitely one of life's treats, so I'd better try and share the experience as best I can. Well, the clutch is heavy, but it's not really a problem. The gear change is mechanical, but well oiled. The steering wheel is chunky, but it's got a remarkably delicate feel to it. And the brakes are heavy bits of kit. It feels as though you're putting your foot directly onto the discs. The seats are designed to the owner's unique body, so they will fit in all the right places. The dimensions, though, of the car, it is very wide and very long, and it's quite difficult to get used to. These door mirror antennae give a beautiful view at the rear. And up front, well, everyone just gets out of your way. As this man in a green van is proving by crossing the white line. Then, of course, there's a noise, which, well, goes like this. You'll be even more pleased to hear that the missing roof doesn't mean a cabin full of rattles or squeaks. You might as well be in the coupe. I can't tell you if the handling on the limit is affected. I was merely running the car in, but I can tell you it felt composed, sorted and rock solid. The chassis and body are so stiff anyway that losing the roof is not a problem. It's all down to the precision of the boys back at the factory. Their carbon work is second to none, and so impressive, one Sicilian customer bought them all a $1,000 dinner as an extra special thank you. The Pagani Roadster will cost you €481,500 plus local taxes, which means if you sign today, £382,961 sterling. If you've got that kind of money lying around, I suggest you scoop it up and buy one. Then feel free to marry me. Zonda Roadster, hit or miss. I was a little worried, but on a warm Sunday in Italy, it can only be a definite hit.
Right, from Italy to France, to find out if a promise has finally turned into a reality. A couple of years ago, Renault got us all very excited. They pumped up a Clio, made it rear-wheel drive and crammed it full of V6. While most journalists were happy enough with the mid-engine concept and outrageous wide body, they belittled its 230 horsepower that could only drag it to 60 in 6.4 seconds. The Clio V6 had committed a cardinal sin. It looked faster than it was. So they brought us back to Renault Land to meet V6 Mark II. Visibly different thanks to its new Clio nose and these titanium-coloured air scoops. But what matters most is what they've changed back here, both inside the engine and underneath it. You see, the problem wasn't just a lack of power, but also a lack of a well-balanced chassis. Basically, it handled like an old Porsche 911 with a light understeery front that suddenly swapped to a backwards into the hedge affair. The engine has been sort of sorted with a new camshaft and a few techie things which bring the power up to 255 bhp and the 0 to 60 down to a far more respectable 5.8 seconds. Aided by a slicker shift and shorter ratios, it certainly feels a lot more lively. Plus, they've done a bit more playful tuning with the air intake. So, as the rev counter winds its way round to that 7,200 limit, it sounds faster. Sorting the handling isn't quite so simple though, and a whole new rear subframe assembly has been created which, allied to a stiffer front anti-roll bar and firmer springing all-round, promises to do the job. You see, the revised suspension geometry keeps the rear wheels at their optimum camber for longer. And the increased firmness reduces the amount of weight transferred during cornering, braking and accelerating, so providing a more stable platform. Simple, isn't it? Mind you, it is hard to tell the difference in everyday use, but you are soon aware of one change that hasn't been made. The V6 Clio still offers precious little lock, and a 3-point turn usually takes 5. Now, most buyers will have them as toys. And where do you play with toys? On tracks. racetrack supplied by Renault, the Circuit du Albi, is either very fast or very slow thanks to some strategically placed chicanes, and neither is really ideal to put this car to the test. But what I can tell you is that this Renault now has a massive amount of rear-end grip, and with that firmer suspension doing its job admirably, it's actually pretty hard to unsettle it, even if you want to. As before, if you enter a corner a bit too quickly, you'll find the front end pushing wide, but now when you lift off to solve the problem, it doesn't suddenly snap into a big oversteer and send you sideways, which is a good job considering that limited amount of lock, which made it very difficult to catch in the old V6. But unfortunately, neither have they provided the V6 with a little bit of power oversteer, which you want to put a smile on your face. So it's now a much, much safer car on track, but not really any more fun. On sale in Britain in July with a price tag of £27,000, it won't outrun the Imprezas and Evos of this world. But if it's a stylish coupe you're looking for, and let's face it, this Clio is a lot more than a hot hatch, then the V6 is a much better choice for the enthusiast than the trendy Audi TT. But that doesn't mean I'd buy one. Like it though I do, come October, the new Nissan 350Z arrives, and that's got more power and handles better. So, hit or miss? Well, let's settle for a near hit, shall we? We've been bringing you some extreme driving experiences from around the world. You've seen a £380,000 Zonda Roadster strolling round Italy. You've seen a V6 Clio roaring round France. But now, fight fans, we're back home. The only place in the world you'll see these two squaring up to each other. The Type UK Subaru Impreza STI and the Mitsubishi Evo 8. They're the latest in the line from these arch rivals, each with their own new set of tiny developments to try to outsmart the other.
But this time there's one major development too, a price cut. Both cars are about £3,000 cheaper than their predecessors, which is like having a year's worth of tyres, insurance and fuel for free. But are they hits or are they misses? Let the campaigning begin.
Styling first. Now, these are not handsome cars. They are not a deft flick of a designer's pen. Let's face it, they're ugly. But because they're plastered in designer labels, they send out all the right signals. Which would you rather look at on your driveway?
You can spot the Evo 8 by this new carbon fibre spoiler, techie lights and 17-inch alloys, and come up the front, hurry up, a sharper nose. It's a cleaner, simpler looking Evo.
The Impreza, meanwhile, has beefed up. They've muscled out the wings, changed the power bulge for a post box, and replaced those ridiculously ugly front headlamps with slightly less ugly ones. The Impreza's interior is very good, though, from the racy pedals to clear dials and a generally solid feel, while the Evo is a much more drab affair, boring pedals, cramped instruments and trim that's just too easy to pull apart.
But then the most important bit is under here. This is the top-of-the-range FQ300. It's basically a standard Evo 8 with more power added after registration to sidestep emissions regulations.
This is the top-of-the-range STI PPP, or ProDrive Performance Pack, which again adds more power after registration to sidestep those regulations.
Both cars are four-wheel drive and both have 2-litre four-cylinder turbocharged engines.
But the similarities end there.
Welcome to Fact Pack Top Trumps. Power.
301. You?
301. Torque.
299.
300. Yes! By one! I beat you by one. 0 to 60.
4.6 seconds. You?
It only says 0 to 62 and it says 4.9 seconds estimate. So I'd call that a draw. MPG.
Doesn't matter.
Oh, no, you're right.
Top speed, though. It says here in excess of 155.
I'm limited to 157.
So no winner there, then.
No. All right, then, the big one. Price.
27 grand.
29.
So that'll be an extra £2,000 for me to play with.
Which you will spend on me, because you love me.
If you could beat me and my Impreza first. From the driver's point of view, little has really changed with the Impreza. Got the same great driving position, but I could do without this pink lettering on the steering wheel. But it's still got fabulous, Vicki, fade-free brakes and this great 6-speed gearbox, which is so enjoyable to use. Handling-wise, again, like the previous STI, it's got diffs at the front and rear, but although that does pull the nose in a bit better than it used to, it's still more understeer than you'd want it to. The Impreza, Vicki. I'll sort her out. Well, what I was trying to say before Vicki rudely interrupted was that the nose still seems to wash out in the corners, while the Evo bites into the turn and lifts a wheel, whereas the STI runs wide. But there is, of course, one way to get rid of the understeer, and that's to give it a bit of the old rally driver's flick. I just can't resist it. 100 miles an hour, and a little bit of a slide. And just to prove it wasn't a fluke, here we go again.
Right, my turn, and the Evo. This new 6-speed gearbox isn't quite to my liking. You don't really know where you are with it, and when you need to change down quickly when we're coming into this corner, you're not quite sure if it's gone into gear or not, and the brakes, which are a bit wooden to start with, heat up when you've done a couple of laps and just sort of fade away, really. Luckily, though, the handling more than makes up for it, thanks to some rather clever differential technology. This car has got super active yaw control and an active centre diff, which means, basically, it can do this. Tail-happy cornering thanks to computers that split the torque between the rear wheels to minimise understeer. Grab it by the scruff of the neck and its opposite lock for fun.
We like the Subaru's brakes, gearbox, interior and price, but we love the Mitsubishi's looks and handling. Back then to the question as to whether or not off-roaders are quite as safe as we think they are. We merrily trundle along in our 4x4s, towering above the traffic around us, quite happy in the belief that we're perfectly safe in our tough, mobile fortress. But riding so high, are we actually as safe as we think we are?
American figures would suggest not. In fact, you might be just one swerve away from disaster. Despite the fact that when a car collides with a 4x4, you're better off in the 4x4, overall, the death rate in off-roaders, or SUVs as the Americans class them, is worse than for ordinary cars. So how can that be? Well, American statistics show that SUVs are more likely to roll over than ordinary cars. Surprisingly, there isn't a reliable test to measure a car's tendency to topple. There are standard tests involving a variety of turns and circles, but it's not clear how they relate to real-life situations. Manufacturers still rely heavily on the gut feel of experienced testers to check for stability. The American Road Safety Agency has an index to predict how likely a 4x4 is to roll over. It's based on the height of the car's centre of gravity and the car's track, the distance between the wheels. They rate cars from 1 to 5 stars, the more the better. The American versions of Toyota's RAV4 and Honda's CR-V get 3 stars, and the US Jeep Grand Cherokee gets 2. But these ratings don't take into account important variables such as the softness of the suspension or the stickiness of the tyres. So what does it take to roll a typical 4x4? What does it take to turn a motorway journey into a whirling white line nightmare?
Well, of course, it's possible to roll any car, whether it's a 4x4 or not. If you hit a ditch or a curb at the wrong speed, the wrong angle, you're going to go over. But there is one place where a car and a 4x4 react very differently, on a nice piece of flat tarmac. Imagine you're cruising down the motorway, 70 miles an hour, suddenly the car in front brakes. You swerve one way, you swerve the other, and however good a driver you are, with no stability control, you're going to spin out. And as long as you don't hit anything, you'll come to a perfectly harmless standstill, a bit shaken maybe. And even when I drove the saloon faster and faster, all it would do was spin. So, what would happen if you're in a 4x4? To find out, we bought this ordinary Range Rover. Quite an old one, but there are many on the second-hand market. We hired specialists to equip it with a rollover cage, racing seat, full safety harness, safety fuel tank, and, to give you a driver's eye view, a shock-resistant camera. We also brought in a professional stunt driver, Julian Spencer, who, with a few basic precautions, was prepared to put our 4x4 to the test. And, as even we didn't know ourselves what was going to happen, we had an ambulance and a fire crew on standby, just in case. Again, a simple motorway simulation, but now at just 45 miles an hour. Suddenly the car will brake and the 4x4 will need to swerve to avoid a rear-end impact. And remember, this is at only 45 miles an hour. Imagine what would have happened if Julian had been doing 70. For Julian, it was just another day in the office. For 4x4 drivers, a shocking image of what might be. If it hadn't been for the rollover cage, the damage would have been even worse. But of course, the latest 4x4s have come a long way since this old Range Rover. The latest Range Rover has air suspension that lowers the car and its centre of gravity at speed to improve stability. And like the new Volvo XC90, stability control to cut power or apply brakes when you're likely to get into trouble. Added to that, more car-like suspension without a separate chassis improves the handling of many 4x4s, including this BMW X5. Even talk in the future of systems to prevent you steering too sharply for a car's equilibrium. But I'm not sure if I'd fancy that if I was heading for a tree. Plus, there are already better curtain airbags to protect passengers in rollovers and stiffer roof structures that resist rollover impact. But whatever they've done to improve 4x4s, I still wouldn't try this sort of emergency avoidance test in any of them. Their centres of gravity are simply too high. You may think you're safer in a 4x4. Me, I'm not so sure. Of course, ours wasn't a proper scientific test, but surely that's the point. We need one.